So I just saw this video on TikTok, right? And I think we've all seen the imagery of being like refined in the refiner's fire, and like how the Lord will have us in a process to refine us, and He keeps allowing us to be in that refiner's fire to deal with the impurities. But I think, and I agree with this, right? But I think that there's a foundational element that I don't agree with most people, because I'm coming out of believing shame about myself, and in believing that, like, whatever, there's honor there instead of it being like I'm a shameful person who's then becoming like not shameful. Basically, it's just like you can think that these impurities are you, right? But I think the impurities are actually in our perspective. This cloudiness of perspective, this darkness in perspective, that if we saw ourselves the way that the Father has always seen us, we would say, you are beautiful, you are pure, you are worthy. We would see what He sees, and His perspective would be our foundation. And I think what makes it difficult, and the reason why we have to be sent into the refiner's fire, not because we are impure. See, I think that's where we have believed shame about ourselves. But it's actually our perspective that has been impure, right? Meaning it has been cloudy, meaning it has been full of darkness. We believe things about ourselves that He doesn't believe about us. And so we are sent into the fire, and the impurities of that unbelief, the impurities of believing something that's not what He believes, gets burned up. That's what I believe. But I think that so many people, and this is where I was coming from, this is, I believe, where God has to rescue you from. What you believe probably most about yourself is that you are ashamed, because you've been deceived in the dark to believe that by doing impure things you are impure. But I think that it all began with perspective, that if you saw yourself the way that God always saw you, you wouldn't do impure things, right? So seeing what God has always seen in you, that being goodness instead of evil, where in sin we believe that we should be ashamed because we're viewing ourselves from a place of lack. I am rotten to the core, and He needs to make me not rotten. And I'm like, no, I don't agree with this perspective anymore. And I believe that the refiner's fire is actually a refiner's fire in your perspective, your understanding of yourself. And the more that you are exposed to the heat of the refiner's fire, the more you're able to see clearly. And seeing clearly is seeing through the perspective of the Father that He's always had for you. See, it's like the healing that transcends time. Because it's to look back at your life and say, I did what I did, and I considered myself impure because I had this sinful perspective. I had this perspective of lack. I had this perspective that was full of darkness. If I did not have this perspective full of darkness, then I wouldn't have done what I did. And so what you did is not who you were or who you are. It was a representation of how much you couldn't see yourself clearly. All right. I think it's a very subtle difference, because we can be like, no, God has to work on me. I'm impure. That's why He sent me through into the refiner's fire, so that I would learn this lesson, and I have to keep going through it until I learn this lesson. And I'm like, that feels tainted in shame. And I think that if you were in, or when you were in the refiner's fire long enough, you find that it is an issue of perspective. He sees full of light with no shadows. You're seeing through shadows. And in those shadows, you've been deceived to believe that you are lacking. You've been deceived to believe that you are impure. And in believing that you were impure, in believing that you were sinful, your sinful behavior became that of which becomes a cycle of shame. I did that, so I'm this. I did that unworthy thing, so I'm unworthy. Right? I did this unholy thing, so I'm not holy, and He has to actually make me holy. And I'm like, I don't think so, bro. Not anymore. Now it seems to be that the only thing that makes sense to me is that God is like, I am the Father that has always seen you correctly. When you see what I have always seen in you, the goodness in you, then you will be set free. The truth will set you free. The truth that has always been true. It doesn't become true after you go through the refiner's fire. It's you come to know, because you can see more clearly after being refined, what has always been true. as opposed to being sent into the refiner's fire as unworthy and coming out worthy, and into the refiner's fire unholy and coming out holy. No, I don't think so. I think it's perspective. It's a washing of perspective. It's a refiner's fire, and the heat is burning off the impurities in your vision. Right? It is your vision of yourself, your perspective of yourself, your understanding of yourself as it relates to the Father that has caused you to do all of these things that you have been deceived to believe are unholy, undeserving, sinful. But sinful, it begins with the perspective of lack. Right? But the truth will set you free in that you were never lacking. When he sees you, he does not see one who is lacking. Since you saw yourself as the one who is lacking, you've tried to overcompensate and therefore sinful behavior. We think that when we go into the refiner's fire that he is making us more holy. I don't think so. I think that he's burning off the impurities of our perspective so that we can see clearly. And in seeing clearly, seeing what he has always seen in us, we are set free in that place. And when we are set free in that place, we will not repeat the same behaviors that we had in the dark. This to me is a very strong distinction. One who goes into the refiner's fire deceived about their own makeup, and then the refiner's fire showing them that they've always been his, as opposed to someone who's just like, I have to make you look like Jesus for me to accept you. Right? It's like, no, I have to get you to see that you look like Jesus so that you can accept yourself, so that you can be accepted by me, so you can receive my radical acceptance of you that I've always had of you. Not now that I've sent you through the fire. But the refining fire shows you that I've always accepted you, that I've always had you, that I've always seen you clearly. It's you that needs to go through refiner's fire to then come to know that you did not see yourself clearly. And in you not seeing yourself clearly, you didn't see anything clearly. So the refiner's fire is that of perspective adjustment. Right? It's going from darkness to 2020 vision. 2020 vision being that of the truth that has always been true. Not something that becomes true because now you're somehow worthy because he has worked on you long enough so that you finally look like Jesus. I'm like, nah, bro. That feels like shame tainted all over it.